Welcome to part 3 of our After Effects tutorial. My name is Arnold Faller, and the third part has the title Working with Masks. While the second part dealt with graphic elements and text elements, I'm going to put a link if you have missed it on the top right. The next part is going to be a little bit shorter. We talk about masks, mostly on videos and pictures, and later on also on masks on solids and how we can animate them. We're going to start with a new composition, this time again taken from a piece of footage, and I'm going to use the same 10-second clips that I did before. So here is a piece of footage, 10 seconds long, showing a train passing by. What is a mask? A mask is a piece of raster, a kind of raster layer that regulates the transparency of the layer below, or the layer that comes together. So placing a mask on an object means I can make parts of the elements visible or invisible, or effective or non-effective. So let's see it first on our video here. So I have the video in my composition, and the most important thing when you work with masks, and with masks usually you use either one of the standard forms, rectangle, circles and so on, or a very general form with the pen tool. The big difference is to the last chapter where we talked about shapes. To draw a shape, you have to make sure that nothing is selected when you add the shape, because then automatically a shape layer is created. In the mask, on the other hand, you have to make sure that the layer that you want to apply the mask to is selected. So you select the layer first that you want to apply the mask to, and then you go to and pick your, for example, rectangle tool. So I'm going to pick the rectangle tool and I draw a rectangle on top of my video. So now I have created a mask that makes only what's inside the rectangle visible. I can see that now down here in the train parameters open up. Now the chapter, before we had only transform and audio, now the chapter masks has been added, and inside the mask there's mask number 1. So the first thing that you see on mask number 1, which is a simple rectangle that I drew, it is set to add. So whenever the mask is set to add, it means you only see what's inside the mask. So for example, if you switch this add to subtract, then it's reversed or inverted. You only see what's outside of the mask, and inside the mask is invisible. Let's bring this back to add. So that's the first thing. Now I can apply more than one mask to a layer. Just the same way you make sure that the train layer is selected here. This time I'm going to hold my mouse a little bit longer on the rectangle. I'm going to use an ellipse tool. And now with the train selected, I'm going to create a circle over here. So now I have created mask number 2. Also it's set to add. That means it will be added together. So the shape of those two masks can later on be changed. For example, if I use the selection tool, I can select parts of my mask, and I always recommend to draw a window around it. So I select one part of the mask, for example, and move it to turn it into a egg-shaped form, or one corner of the rectangle, and I can move it there. Once the masks overlap, then they will be added together. This is the when it's set to add. Let's make sure the masks overlap a little bit more so we can see what the other modes are. So if both of them are set to add, then it's quite clear. Mask 1, mask 2, both are added. So if I use mask 1 is add and mask 2 is set to subtract, then it will be subtracted. If both masks are set to subtract, then again everything outside of the mask will be made visible. So here it is, subtract and subtract. If I use it, for example, Intersect, both of them are set to intersect, and only what both masks have in common is visible there. So you can play around with those settings. None, then of course it's non-visible. Let's go to add and have both masks here. You can also use the invert function that kind of lets you like add. Invert would be subtract, so I could invert 1, 2, and so on and so on. So you could try all kinds of combinations. It's more like, it's a lot like Boolean operations between those two objects. Okay, you can have multiple masks, and you can always edit them to make sure you are on mask. Then you see all the points, and then you can select the points, the handles, and adjust the mask. Okay, not only the masks vertices or the mask's points can be adjusted, but also, let's go to mask 1. If you open it up, you can see different things. For example, the shape can be changed, more about that later. You can feather it, that means the mask's edges are not sharp anymore. If the yellow line here is a little confusing, you can also turn the line here off. So when you want to see the masks, or if you turn it off, you don't see the mask, but only the effect that the mask has. So that's the feather. So you're feathering it, so you're making it softer, not so sharp, the edges. That is the feather point. Then you can also, let me get the line back. Let's bring that back to 0, so a sharp line. You can also change the opacity of the mask. So is it full 100% working or only 50%? That works more for other masks than here on the video. And you can also make an expansion, so you make the mask larger or smaller. You can outline it towards the inside or negative, or towards the outside, and it's positive. So you can change the size of the mask here. And of course, with the second mask as well, and so on. The mask that I'm showing you right now works mostly for videos. So when I run my video, so you will see, of course, that things move in my video, and this in the same way also with pictures. When you have any picture, then of course nothing is moving, it's just a single picture, but you can mask it using a single mask. This orange line is later on not visible on the video, so you more or less see it this way when you turn it, when you turn the mask button off. Okay, so that is how to mask a video. The next thing is, I'm going to show you how to animate the mask. So when it's possible to change the mask's, the path of the mask, and with its points and handles, you can also, here you see it, animate. Every single value, feather, opacity, expansion, and so on, can be animated because it has a stopwatch here in the front. So, for example, how to animate the mask path. So I'm moving my time indicator to the very beginning, and then I say, okay, the mask path of mask 1, this is only the yellow one, will be animated. So I press the stopwatch to turn animation on. Then I'm moving ahead of time, just like 1 second or so. Then I select parts of the mask and move them. So from here, from the original position to the new position, this point changed, and maybe this one changed, maybe this one, and this one as well. So now, from here to here, the shape of the mask changed, and can go further, and so on. So those points can be changed over time. Oops, sorry, I moved the whole line, and so on. If one of the points is sorry, not on this mask, it doesn't work on this one. If one of the points of the mask, for example, here at mask number 2, let me also try this. Mask number 2, mask path is set to animate, and go ahead in time and select part of mask 2. If one mask is not a corner point like those, but with a handle, then not only can you animate the point itself, but also the handle. So while it's here, and let's make it a little bit smaller, then you will see not only is the handle, is the point animated, but also the handle. Okay, so that is, every point can be nicely animated. So you can use a mask to make everything else invisible, for example, but parts of the element, and then while the mask is moving, while the video is moving, you're also moving the mask to include the object. That is called, there's different ways to do this, and traveling masks and rotoscoping are some terms for that. We will do more about this later, but this is just in theory right now. So masks can also be animated. And as a last point, working with masks, I'm going to show you something that is really important. Let me kick out the train video, and now I have an empty composition. And the last thing that I would like to show you is, because we ended the last session with creating shapes in After Effects, shapes on shape layers, and I'm now going to show you a technique that is giving you the same result, but using a slightly different technique. And that is, instead of creating a shape on a shape layer, you create a solid layer with a mask on it. So what is a solid layer? A solid layer is just a piece of colorful, like a piece of colorful paper, or just a layer that has a certain color. Let's add the solid layer first. There's nothing in it, so I do a right click, new solid. Here, new solid. For the new solid, you have to choose what color does the solid have. Let's get something colorful. So here it is, slight orange. And what size it is. Usually when you do something like this, the size of the solid is the same as the composition itself. So the comp size, that's what's called comp size. So you click OK, and now you have a red colored layer. It's one layer fully red. And now you use the masking to create shapes in this color. For example, a rectangle. So here's the rectangle tool. Make sure you have the solid selected, because otherwise it's a shape and you want to have a mask. So the solid is selected, and then you choose your rectangle and you draw a line. So now, instead of having a rectangle as a shape layer, you're having a solid with a mask on it. And you can adjust the mask just like we did before. You can animate or change the mask path. You can use feather it, so make it softer at the edge. You can make the transparency of the mask, so you can make it slightly transparent, which we don't see right now. Or you can make the mask larger or smaller expansion. So that is all the possibilities with masks you now have with your shape. Of course, the line of the mask that we see right now, we don't see that at the end. So we can create simple shapes with the same effect. Let me try it again. You can also remove the mask again once it's done, and by simply clicking on mask and hit delete, that deletes the mask, and we are back to our red solid. If you have created a solid and you want to change its color later, you can do this in a couple of ways. One of them is using an effect on it. So in the effects, one would be to use a fill effect on your mask. So fill, here it is, and when you place the fill effect on your solid, you can just pick the new solid color here. So let's go from red to slight green. So I use the fill color as a solid. Also, instead of using a fill effect, and here are the effect window, when you have more than one, then you will add up here in this effect window. You can, when you remove the fill layer, you can also use the tint layer, I guess, color correction, and take it and tint it. So right now it goes from black to white, so can pick a certain tint color. So, but right now we are quite happy with the color that we have chosen. Instead of using a regular rectangle tool, I'm going to use a very general pen tool. So I make sure that the medium layer is selected and I use the pen tool. I can create both masks with corners like this one, or with soft corners like this one. Okay, so I can mask either the inside, or I can of course invert the mask, then the outside with add, change that to subtract, and I will have everything else masked except the selected shapes. Okay, so just like we did before with the pictures or with the videos. And here's one more thing that I think is quite helpful, and that is, let me delete the solid, and that is when you want to create a mask, for example, a circular mask, but first I need a solid, sorry. Let's create a new solid, and we're going to do that in the green, and this time I'm going to make the solid not comp size, so not 1920 by 1080, but any fixed size, for example 500 by 500 pixels. So the solid is smaller than the whole composition. It's not a problem, just I have to do something in here. And now this solid, always a rectangle, I'm going to use an elliptic tool, and now I can draw any kind of map on it, so like this. If you want to have a circular map that is the maximum size that is possible on your rectangle, instead of taking the ellipse tool and drag the ellipse here on the screen, you just double click it and it will automatically generate the largest possible ellipse, which is a circle in this case, as a mask. And now of course you can always add it and so on. And that is quite funny, because this mask here, I can also duplicate the mask alone. So I'm going in here, click on mask, Control D for duplicate, and now I have the same mask 2 times. So 1 and 2, they're exactly the same on top of each other. Right now they are added, so there's no difference. What I'm going to do is I take mask number 2 and make it smaller. That is mask expansion, and then drag it into the negative. Make it slightly smaller. Now they're still add, so the inner mask is actually not visible because it just adds to the outer mask. But what if I take the inner mask and make it subtract? Then it will be subtracted from the outer mask. And what I'm creating is a kind of tube, or like a circle with a very thick line. So with this method, you can not only create the shapes that we saw so far, but we can also give them like very thick strokes and so on. And even if I would, for example, would add a third mask to my medium solid here, for example, the one with the pen tool. Let's draw this and this and this and this. Oh, sorry, I've drawn, I didn't select it properly on the shape layer, so this one needs to be selected, and then shape. So here it is. And now the new shape, I'm not going to do add and subtract, but I'm using intersect. So only this part that is both created by the first one, then subtracted with the second one, and then only what's intersecting with the third one is now visible. The cool thing is, if I go out of here, it looks like this. It looks like just like a little green symbol. And if I take my whole new solid and I rotate it, I can simply rotate this and create a very special effect when I want to do some graphic animations and so on. But maybe we'll do an example about this later on. So here it is, a simple solid that I rotate around itself with a couple of masks. In this case, actually 3 different masks. The first one adds, the second one subtracts, and then an intersect mask. Okay, that's it for working with masks. Play around with it. I'm sure you'll get some nice results. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.